My boyfriend Steve and I have been dating for over a year and a half. I met him in one of my upper-level classes 2 years ago. At the time he was finishing up his degree, before moving on and working on his master's. Since we started talking, seeing each other, and dating casually, I really loved our entire relationship. Steve and I had a lot of similar interests, which included traveling. We did a small trip to South America a couple months ago for a few weeks, Peru and Chile. We had an amazing time. It was once we got back from our trip that I saw our relationship in a whole different way. We traveled well together, and bonded in a new way. I knew I was in a great relationship. I thought we had a great relationship, until I got some news a few days ago. 3 days ago, I went over to drop a MacBook charger over at my best friend's house, Chenille. Chenille and I have been best friends since we were in high school from the age of 16 years old. I have always considered her to be my number one, and closest person in my life. I have noticed that the past 6 months we haven't hung out in the same capacity that we usually have. Both of us have been busy with our lives, school, work, relationships, etc. But I kinda got the feeling after this past year of university around April that she was starting to move away. She had a bad with her ex that lasted under a year. He cheated on her with a coworker, and the rest is history. They broke officially around the end of January. As I went over to drop off her extra charger that she borrowed, I talked with her mom for a bit. Chenille ended up getting called in to pick up an extra serving shift at the restaurant she has worked at during her degree. Her mom wanted to talk to me about a few things. I was puzzled. Chenille's mom was always really outgoing and funny. We had known each other for over 8 years at least. But she wanted to have a serious talk. Chenille's mom, Karen, went on to tell me that she saw Steve and Chenille sneak around the back of the house about a month or so ago. Karen went on to explain that she noticed this happening 2 other times. At first, she thought we were all hanging out. But Karen told me that she got a weird gut feeling on this situation. She told me that I should talk to Steve and Chenille ASAP. Steve and I were supposed to go out for dinner last night. He picked me up, and off we went. I felt really bad and humiliated the entire time we were out. We ate dinner, had a couple drinks, but we didn't talk much. Steve kept asking me all night what was the matter. I told him nothing. Finally, when we got back to my place, we sat in my room and I asked him, and told him what Chenille's mom, Karen, is told me. He didn't answer. In fact, he went pale white. That gave me the answer I needed. I broke down and Steve tried to comfort me. I didn't want him touching me. I didn't even want to hear it. I told him to leave, but I basically had to force him to leave. I tried calling Chenille and texted her that I needed to talk to her. I got no response. Not one. Basically, 2 of the closest people I have had in my life betrayed me. This is so terrible and I feel so bad. I have like no one right now. I have a cousin, Kat, who got married to Henry early this year. We weren't close as kids, she was pretty spoiled and would always brag about how much designer stuff she has. Be really mean to people under the guise of just trying to help, etc. Don't go out of our way to interact with one another, but I do see her at family events and whatnot and we make small talk. I'm engaged to Chris, who is a software engineer. He's co-head of his department at work with 2 other people, not too long ago. Chris was telling me about how they had some new employees and one of them sounded really familiar. He told me the name and I realized it was Kat's husband. Also, he and Henry hadn't met face to face yet. Kat and Henry had a huge wedding. It was really nice, but all she did for months is brag about how amazing her wedding was. The wedding stuff's died down now, so recently she started going on about how wealthy her husband is and what a great lifestyle they have. One of my other aunts celebrated her 50th about a week ago. I went with Chris and Kat was there with Henry. We were chatting and Kat was saying how Henry has a fantastic new job that pays even more than his previous one. Henry chimed in and said that they were already planning to buy a new house. Kat asked what Chris does. I said he was an engineer like Henry and he has a good job too, but I'll admit I left out where he works on purpose. She smiled and nodded, then said it's fine. She understands that I'm embarrassed and want to keep it quiet. So that was pretty much the end of our conversation then. When we were leaving, She pulled me aside and told me to let her and Henry know if we needed help with the wedding. Obviously, I knew what she meant and it was just another dig, but I said,
"Bye,"
and left. Literally 2 days later, I get a DM from Kat and she's furious, well, as much as one can be through text, that I didn't tell them that Chris was one of Henry's bosses. Henry was shocked to see him in the office and Chris made a comment, "Tell Kat OP and me don't need help but thanks for offering." Henry's really embarrassed and so's Kat, and she said that we made them look bad on purpose and if she knew, she'd have never made those comments. It was my duty to tell her and Henry. Chris and I had a really good laugh over this, but she sent a text out to the family group chat we have saying how she was blindsided by me. A few others said that what we did was petty and wrong. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday. My girlfriend, Rose, and I have been together for 4 years and she is 5 months pregnant with our first child. My mom seemed to really like Rose, or at the very least tolerated her, but after we announced that we were expecting, something definitely switched in her. She has become extremely rude and disrespectful towards my girlfriend. She makes passive-aggressive comments at every chance she gets. I've had to take a step back from my mother until she fixes her behavior. Rose had gone to visit her family who lives far out of town. It was a very last-minute trip, and she drove herself to the destination and back. Unfortunately, at around 6 p.m., her car broke down and she was forced to pull over. Fortunately, my brother, Chris, who's great with cars and lives about an hour and 1/2 from where Rose was stranded, was willing to pick her up and sorted everything out. I was out of the country, so I'm grateful that my brother sorted everything out for her. Chris moved back in with my mom about a year ago. Obviously, the situation wasn't the best. especially considering the tension between Rose and my mom that exists for no particular reason. But I hoped my mom could put her pettiness aside for at least a night. It was too late for Chris to drive Rose back home, so my brother told her that he would drive her back tomorrow morning. An arrangement that my mom seems to not like, but one that she managed to keep her mouth shut about, my girlfriend tells me. Rose helps prepare dinner, wash up, and actually engage in a decent conversation with my mom for the first time in ages. However, they mostly avoid each other. Chris goes to bed earlier, leaving my mom and Rose. My mom lives in a 2-bedroom apartment, and since both bedrooms were taken, Rose assumed that she would be sleeping on the couch. She apparently assumed wrong. My mom gives Rose the thinnest blanket ever and basically screams at her, telling her that she has to sleep on the floor to not ruin her couch. She tells Rose to make do with the pillows on the couch and the blanket that provides zero warmth. Rose thought about protesting, but ultimately decided against it. According to Rose, my mom kept opening her door to check if she was sleeping on the couch, so she couldn't even try to sleep on the couch. At 5 a.m., Chris found Rose on the couch and let her sleep on his bed. He ended up telling me, but told me to not make a big fuss out of it. I did the exact opposite. I called my mom, very angry, and told her that she was disrespecting her so badly. She tried to defend herself by saying that she didn't harm the baby, and it's okay for pregnant women to sleep on the floor. But I refused to hear any of it. Chris agrees with me, but told me that I shouldn't make it a fight. I feel like I'm losing my mind.